I wanted to just share with you basically my life experience, which is that um, in almost every case, um, individuals or even individual groups or even formidable, well-resourced individual groups can't by themselves accomplish big things. And unfortunately, in the national security space in particular, there are a lot of big things at the moment, most decidedly. So this has driven me over the years, and I hate to confess this, but I guess it's going on 50 of them at this point. I have really believed that the most important thing we can do to address particularly big problems is to partner with others to get whatever can be done. So I'm going to talk with you a little bit about the idea of coalitions and how they can make you more effective in whatever your advocacy efforts are. And we'll go to the second slide, I guess, after the title. What are the key requirements for these coalitions? One is obvious, I guess, but it needs to be said. You need to be clear about what you're doing, why you're doing it, the nature of the challenge that has to be faced, and to the extent you can, what you propose be done about it. Wherever possible, be open to and be eliciting of people who are aligned with you in that clarity, that set of purposes. It does require generally some infrastructure. In my experience, as mostly impecunious throughout those 50 years, it's can be minimal. It really can. If you really concentrate on making sure that there's good communications between the partners, that's the kind of minimal but absolutely decisive factor in almost any good coalition. If you can bring some resources to bear, it's really helpful to have somebody who is facilitating the program for you beyond the communications, getting the heavy lifting done. This can be done part-time in some cases. It can be done by several people if possible, but you need some, if you have the resources, you need to staff a little bit for these coalitions. And I want to just emphasize what I consider to be the iron rule of successful coalitions, and that is, as my old boss Ronald Reagan famously had on his desk, no less, he said, quote, "There is no limit to what a man can do or where he can go if he doesn't mind who gets the credit." And I really believe that to be a simple proposition, harder in execution, but absolutely decisive to whether you get the job done or not. I'm going to talk to you as in a case study of all of this, our Sovereignty Coalition. And I want to say a particular word of thanks to Summer Ingram, who being not only a part of this exercise and a great resource at Liberty Counsel and Liberty Counsel Action, but also a key member of our coalition. She can attest to when it works. And I think this is one of the most effective coalitions I certainly have ever been participating in. It is, as is often the case, especially when you're asking people to volunteer their time, it's kind of a pickup team. We've actually got scores of members. I'm not quite sure what the current count is. They started, many of them, as frontline docs and other medical professionals, people who had been in the fight with the World Health Organization in particular because of the damage it did to us in the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But whether it was vaccine mandates or whether it was injured individuals or people who simply witnessed malfeasance in the public health arena, at the level of the federal government, in some cases, the state level, these international entities, notably the World Health Organization and the UN, We've got a bunch of folks like myself who've sort of come at it from a national security perspective, concerned about specifically the implications for our security as well as our sovereignty if we lose our uh, uh, freedoms, as many of these globalists have in mind. Um, Reggie Littlejohn and I started this thing up. It's been a wonderful partnership, but it's made all the more so by the wonderful people that we've been privileged to work with. Our goal, next slide, is fairly straightforward. It started out being about the World Health Organization, as I said, and its um, malfeasance in the COVID-19 pandemic, notably shilling endlessly for the Chinese Communist Party, which, of course, was responsible for the COVID-19 bio-warfare attack. And I use all of those terms advisedly. You'd never know that that was what we were subjected to by the World Health Organization's accounts or its prescriptions in the person of its Director General, Tedros Ghebreyesus. Incredibly, the World Health Organization has been beavering away ever since then to expand its powers and has, in fact, as we'll talk about here in a minute, been focused particularly on getting emergency authorities that would give it, essentially the status of a proto, if not effective, world government. The game plan that we have followed more or less through the 3+ years we've been in business as a coalition has been to counter what were the utterly relentless efforts of the Biden-Harris administration to cede our sovereignty to the WHO and to minimize wherever they could resistance to its dictates. What we have tried to do is to turn this subject, which is fairly arcane, even though it touches all of our lives, into a real public policy issue. And I think we can say we have done that. We have built the brand of the coalition. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. As a resource as well as an authoritative player in the fight against the world government agenda. We've done that by pulling together grassroots networks well beyond the coalition. We've enlisted some impressive political figures. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. And we have been somewhat successful. I think, frankly, this is an area where we'd like to have more resources because I think we could do a lot better with them in amplifying the message and the work that we do. But we have found that there are, particularly as John Stenberg was talking about, friendly media who are quite happy to help, and they have done so. Our specific tasks have basically been trying to interfere with the negotiation of these new treaties whereby the World Health Organization would get their hands around our sovereignty, and failing that, especially to ensure that the United States Senate has a role in stopping these treaties. It's supposed to, under our Constitution, serve as a quality control mechanism on these things because the framers understood that you could lose the country in the form of people who are ceding things like sovereignty and our freedoms through treaties, very much like the kind that we've got from the WHO. Building the team and focusing the effort, just I think a general practice. It's a good idea to hold regular calls. We do them weekly for the purposes of just having the best ideas put forward and having people feel as though they are participating and having a say. We don't always have large groups, but we've got activists who help us make it work. And when I say make it work, I specifically mean activist work. It means staying on the offense, an agenda that is not proactive, reactive, but proactive. We are always looking for more partners. I commend that to you as something that helps bring new blood and fresh ideas and energy to your coalition. We've used some non-traditional means. If you're not familiar with it, I commend Align Acts to you. X Spaces, I'm a convert to X Spaces. I didn't know anything about them before we got involved with this coalition, and I've been impressed that they do help spread the word and get people engaged. Podcasts, of course, and various other media, including some, if possible, that are very, very helpful. I'll mention two in a moment. All of this really comes down to sort of asymmetric warfare, to use the military metaphor. We're almost always outgunned, especially when you are without a lot of resources. You're up against, in this case, big pharma and big global government, as well as the government of the United States under Biden. So all of this is to say, you need to be lean and you need to be able to engage in what I think of as the razzle-dazzle game. There's an old metaphor which applies to most of these coalitions that I'm involved in, and that is you are generally a couple of folks in a trench banging like the Dickens on mess kits to make it sound like there's a division out there. It's the part of the art of the political warfare. And again, just initiatives that we can pursue at the federal level. They're always harder. You've gotten some great suggestions from Jonathan about how to make that work. But I find generally, as the framers intended, at the state level, where you are able to be closer to the people, you can get more done. And that's certainly been true of these efforts we've been making with the global governance. Just techniques employed, it's fairly self-explanatory. We've used webinars. We have had a number of what we call sovereignty summits. Ron Johnson was kind enough, senator from Wisconsin, great leader in the Congress on all of these issues, hosted a pretty impressive briefing that we did on Capitol Hill. We've done multiple Capitol Hill briefings, congressional briefings, primarily House members, but Senator Johnson's participated in some of them. I mentioned House and Senate legislation, as well as the state level, all vehicles that are to be pursued. I think if you can find good vehicles for them. Press releases. Two of the media that we've been using extensively are War Room, Steve Bannon's great show. I was on it this morning on a different topic. My own television program we use relentlessly called Securing America on Real America's Voice also. Earned media, wherever you can get them to do your bidding, as John Stenberg was talking about, that's always good. And I agree with basically his sort of list of those that are probably most susceptible to that, starting with your aligned conservative media, radio, and local TV. And then again, X Spaces, as I mentioned earlier, very important platform. Our allies in this fight, which, as Summer can attest, has made all the difference, thanks to the work of particularly Joe Gebbia, one of our very, very effective members of the coalition, translated into the following numbers of public officials, political officers and the like, who threw in with us in opposing global government and the World Health Organization treaties. 22 attorneys general, initially 20, and then we ultimately got up to 26 state governors. Every member of the Republican Senate in the last Congress, 49 of them, the House Freedom Caucus and the Conservative Opportunity Societies, two great groups in the House. We've been able to enlist foreign parliamentarians from around the world, as well as a guy you may have heard of. He was a candidate. That would be Donald Trump. And that, next slide, gave rise to this happy news when he became president of the United States. Indeed, on day one of his inauguration, right after the inauguration, he declared that we were getting back out of the World Health Organization, which is great. Lastly, and I'll just say the work is not done just if we get out and and we are relieved of the burdens of being subject to the Director General of the World Health Organization and the emergency powers that he's now been accreting. We're in the business of trying to stop the treaty that gave him those powers, at least as it bears on us, the so-called International Health Regulations Amending Treaty. There is also, by the way, a UN parallel effort underway. Both of these envision giving these unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats emergency powers to declare whatever they think is an emergency to be one and to tell us what to do about them. And this runs the gamut from pandemics to, I don't know, black swan events, whatever those are. And it's just wholly inappropriate and I think utterly inconsistent with our national sovereignty and security and freedoms to have these kinds of people being able to dictate to us anything. Finally, I will just say there is another treaty that they are working away in the World Health Organization. We're very focused on trying to stop it. It's called a Pandemic Preparedness and Response Treaty. We consider it to be a threat in the ways that I've indicated on the slide. Digital gulag is what Reggie Littlejohn has called what they're gunning for, essentially giving all of us IDs, which then can be used as part of a Chinese-style social credit system to control us. There are censorship requirements that will deprive us once again of freedom of speech. There would be vax mandates, you can be sure, other big pharma predations, the redistribution of wealth and intellectual property, socialism in full force under global government. And not least, the proliferation of bioweapons would be in the works with this deal, because there's a play that you'll give the third world nations certain access to resources if they will turn over any exotic diseases that they find that might become pandemic in character. That's a formula for a lot more biological warfare, my friends. So I'll just conclude by saying, if any of this is helpful to you, there's a lot more where this came from. We have 5 very active coalitions that I'm working with at our Institute for the American Future. One focused on China, which was the subject of my conversation with Steve Bannon just now. The Committee on the Present Danger China, it's called. We have the Victory Coalition, which argues that the Sharia supremacists who are now waging war relentlessly against our friends in Israel and others of us have in their crosshairs this country as well, and nothing less than victory against them will suffice. We have a Save America's Military Coalition, which has been initially focused on trying to get the cultural Marxists out of our military, something Donald Trump is, I'm very pleased to say, hard at doing, along with Pete Hegseth. But also now focused on, can we safely cut defense? And if not, what should we be spending money on? And finally, we have a coalition we call Save the Persecuted Christians, which should be of interest to all of you, I think. Its purpose is basically to help people understand, wage, and win the spiritual warfare in which we find ourselves engaged now. A symptom of which is the fact that 385 million Christians are being heavily persecuted around the world. And there's reason to believe that those who are doing it want to do it here as well. So in addition to the Sovereignty Coalition, we've got these 4 others. If you're interested in anything along the lines of those as a model for your own work, or perhaps something you might want to be helpful with, we would welcome that indeed. You can go to usfuture.org to learn more about what we do, how we do it, and to be in touch with me. So thank you very much.